Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel and the podcast. Before we get into it, please do remember to hit that like button if you haven't done so already, and do also subscribe if you leave us a rating and also subscribe as well. Right, let's get into this. Final four, the final four of the ATP Rome Masters 2022 or the Italian Open, whichever one you want to call it. Let's get into this. First of all, before we do, actually, I want to touch upon very briefly the quarterfinals yesterday because I think it'll set us up nicely to preview the two semi-finals. So, first of all, let's start off with, in my opinion, the best of the bunch: Djokovic versus Felix Auger Aliassime. I wasn't expecting much from Felix. I was expecting Djokovic to win the straight sets. He did, but, and this is a big but. I think Felix played his best ever match on clay. I think he played that well. He lost 7-5, 7-6. And look, I mean, in the first set, he got broken. He actually had the first breakpoint opportunity. He didn't take it. Djokovic took the first one that he had, and it was at 30-40 as well. So it wasn't like it was love 40. He took it. He was clinical. Felix then broke him back. It was at 5-all, and then he got broken at 5-all. He got broken at 5-6 down. So he was serving to stay in the set. He was still on serve. He was disappointed visibly, as you can probably imagine. And then the second set was a similar story, but instead at 5-6, he managed to serve it out. He took us to a tiebreaker, and then Djokovic just managed the tiebreaker a lot better. I think Felix had a little bit of nerves, a bit loose in that tiebreaker. But before we move on to Djokovic, and then we're going to talk about him, of course, in more depth. He'll be playing Casper Ruud in the semi-finals. Spoiler alert. Felix, I think, served incredibly well. Now, both these players, to be fair, I thought served really well. But Djokovic, I think we've come to expect it recently. I mean, he had hit 77% of first serves in, 74% win percentage behind the first serve, 4 aces. Felix, 11 aces, 64% first serves made, win percentage behind the first serve, 71% of points. So, look, I mean, both as well with win percentages above 50% behind the second serve. I think it really highlights how well both served. And I think for me, Felix it was incredible, especially at the start. His stats at the end of the first set were just phenomenal on serve, and it dipped a little bit in the second set. But generally, it was just like, I was like, what am I watching? He was serving like a serve bot. And the reason why those stats are so impressive is because you have to cater in the returner. So Felix is a pretty good returner, fine. But Djokovic is the best returner ever to play the game, in my opinion. The fact that Felix was able to hit 11 aces against him on a slow clay court is ridiculous. Like, absolutely ridiculous. So that's one thing. And the second thing was the rallies. And we saw some incredible rallies. I cannot emphasize enough that if you haven't seen the highlights of this match, go and watch them. Even watch the whole match in full if you can, because it was, for me, blockbuster from start to finish. In some incredible rallies where both players would go from defense to attack, transitioning incredibly well, and then nick the point. They were like, there was literally peaks and troughs throughout a whole point where someone had the momentum. It was just a great watch. It really was. It was a tug of war and some incredible points, and especially around the net as well, like touch and feels, little dinks cross court. For a drop shot winner in return to another drop shot, or volleys, smashes, getting red. I mean, it had everything. It really had everything for me, and it was one of my favorite matches of the year so far in terms of best of three. Of course, the Djokovic Alcaraz best of three match, I think, will probably go down as the best of three match of the year, I think, most likely. But this was, I think, a pleasant surprise, given that I didn't really expect much from Felix. So a massive, massive kudos to him. But Djokovic is too strong. He loves it in Rome. He's so, so good. In Italy, the crowd, well, I was of the opinion that the crowd loved him. And that obviously he speaks Italian fluently, and I thought he had an affinity with the crowd. But as I was doing commentary for this match, some people were saying that the crowd were booing him. Now, I couldn't hear it myself, so let me know in the comment section whether that was the case. And if it was, I'm very, very surprised. I mean, is it because they absolutely love Felix and they're cheering him on? I don't know, but either way, it's a bizarre turn of events, because I thought they absolutely adored him, but I don't know. Interesting one. Let me know. But anyway, Djokovic through to the semis. Casper Ruud did it against Shapovalov the hard way, 7-6, 7-5, a 9-7 tiebreaker as well for that first set. You kind of feel like that was where the match was won as well. And Zverev cruised past Christian Garin 7-5, 6-2. No surprises there. And then Tsitsipas with a very, very accomplished performance against Sinner, who I think was carrying a little bit of a niggle. The first set was unbelievable, by the way. I mean, what a first set that was. And then the second set, for me, 6-2, and Tsitsipas just took over. And he was really good in the tiebreaker because I'm pretty sure he was down. Sinner was playing some inspired tennis, and he just was businesslike and got it done. And I think he expects himself to win on clay, and he has this kind of air of confidence. On other surfaces, I think he does expect to win as well, but it's just, I feel like he knows how good he is on clay and how well he can play. And I genuinely feel that he has, it's not arrogance, it's this confidence, which he's right to feel considering he's made the Roland Garros final last year. He's won multiple clay court tournaments in the last year as well. Like, he is a real contender, and I think people shouldn't sleep on him for Roland Garros. Everyone's talking about Djokovic and Alcaraz, and I think, obviously with Nadal getting injured, or, that foot injury flaring up even, again, a lot of people are saying, well, we can't really put him at the top now of the favourites list. So Tsitsipas, though, don't sleep on him. Don't sleep on him. He was 2 sets to love up in that Roland Garros final, if you don't remember. Kind of choked a little bit. But the fact that he was there says a lot. Right, let's get into then the actual semi-final. So we've got two, of course. I want to touch upon Tsitsipas Zverev first, because for me, that is a blockbuster. It really is. I absolutely love watching the two play. Zverev managed to beat Tsitsipas last week, actually, in Madrid. So it's a replay of last week where he beat Tsitsipas in 3 sets, 6-4, 3-6, 6-2. That was a really good match as well. I really enjoyed it. And I think it was definitely a turning point for Zverev, in my opinion, against Tsitsipas in the head-to-head, because the head-to-head, if you look at the head-to-head, it's 7-4 to Tsitsipas, right? So you think, okay, so before that match, you have to remember it was 7-3 to Tsitsipas. But Zverev on the hard courts is not like he's got a good chance against Tsitsipas, I feel. But it's on the clay. Now, he hadn't beaten Tsitsipas on clay before that match. Can you believe that? I kind of can, considering how well Tsitsipas has been playing on the clay since the start of his career. But Zverev is not a bad clay court player himself. He won Madrid last year. Of course, he made the final this year in Madrid as well. Lost to Alcaraz. But that was a long match as well. I mean, he was up late. I'm not saying that he would have won it. I think he still would have lost. Alcaraz is playing that well at the moment. But look, he's in some really good form, and he's had a very, very kind of simple run to the semi-finals so far, Zverev. He hasn't had to face a Sinner. He's faced Christian Garin. Like, no offense to Christian Garin, but he's no Jannick Sinner, right? And I think for him, it would have been a very, very, I think, just comfortable week so far in Rome. Now, come up against Tsitsipas, and I think ordinarily he might be thinking, damn, I'm playing Tsitsipas. I have never beaten him on clay. This is a really tricky matchup. But he'll look towards that Madrid Open matchup. He'll think back to last week and say, okay, what was working? What was working? What do I need to do? And I think it will be another close 3-setter. I do. I'm not 100% sure which way it's going to go. I'll tell you my prediction in a second. But I think the biggest thing for me comes down to the serve return dynamic. Now, I think Zverev turned on the serve in that semi-final in Madrid. It kind of deserted him for majority of the tournament. And then suddenly against Tsitsipas, it came back. I mean, first serve percentage of 73%, 83% win percentage behind the first serve, 71% behind the second serve. Tsitsipas's first serve percentage was down at 56%. And then win percentage behind the first serve, 74%, behind the second serve, 56%. Now, that's surprising because you would expect Tsitsipas to have a higher proportion of points won behind the first serve because of how many forehands he's able to hit after the serve, and he's one of the best players when it comes to 1+ plays behind the serve +1 plays. The amount of forehands he makes is incredible. I think in his previous match, it was 91%. So think about that. You serve, imagine you're playing a match and you hit a serve, right? And the next shot that comes back towards you, so the return that comes towards you, 91% of the time, you're able to make it into a forehand. And not just make it into a forehand, because a lot of people can make it into a forehand, but it looks awkward. He makes it into a forehand, and it's normally an attacking ground stroke, or at least a ground stroke that's at neutral. Isn't that ridiculous? That's just so impressive. So let's see how he gets on against Zverev. But I think, yeah, the serve return dynamic is the biggest thing for me. I think Zverev is a better returner generally. And I think, if I'm being honest with you, I think if both are serving at their best, I think Zverev is a better server as well. But I think the issue comes on the clay that some of Tsitsipas's weaknesses, like the return of serve, is papered over, especially on this is a much slower clay court than Madrid last year as well. Sorry, last week even. And on top of that, the backhand. So the backhand from Tsitsipas is a long motion, right? And so that's why we see a lot of shanks. And I think on the clay, he gets away with it because it's a slower surface. And he does commit to it at times as well. And he actually hits it pretty well. He's also adopted a kind of a decent slice, which he tried to utilize against Zverev. And at times he did have success. So I think if I was Tsitsipas, I'll be thinking I need to hit that backhand slice cross court into Zverev's backhand, which Zverev's backhand is incredibly solid, like one of the best two-handers on tour, alongside, of course, someone like a Djokovic, who's probably got the best. And I don't think, though, he likes bending down low to his ankles to hit that backhand. And normally he doesn't like slicing back, because wherever he'll try and hit the drive backhand in return. So if I'm Tsitsipas, I'm slicing into that backhand, not all the time, but at least as a variation, and trying to utilize that as a plan, especially if we're going backhand to backhand. He's not able to make the into-out forehand, which is his favorite shot, Tsitsipas. Then I would say, okay, I'm going to hit a slice, in some of this rally and try and make it difficult, change up the pace with Zverev, because Zverev likes pace on the ball because he's able to deflect it well, and that's how he's able to generate pace on his shots. When he has to generate pace of his own, that's when he can start to make some errors for me. That's how I see it anyway. But in the first serve dynamic as well, I think if Zverev hits his corners, it's really tough. Even on clay, he's just that bigger server. But on this surface and it being slower, Tsitsipas should have and should be able to make more returns. So then it comes down to how does the kind of rally dynamic, I guess, unravel itself. And I think Tsitsipas has to use the drop shot because Zverev loves standing so far back on the clay courts. And I think if Tsitsipas can dictate with the forehand and then utilize a drop shot and his angles that he's so good at using on clay courts with the high topspin balls, then he's in a good position. For Zverev, I think he just can't push the ball back into the court. He has to be aggressive with the forehand, commit to going down the line with the forehand, because you want to go into this Tsitsipas backhand. That is his weaker side for sure, 100%. There's no doubts about it. With Zverev, we're not sure. His backhand's so solid that you might even say his forehand's his weakness, and it probably breaks down more, but he can be more hurtful on the forehand. He's going to have to commit at times to going into it on the forehand as well, using angles to try and access the Tsitsipas backhand. And then backhand to backhand, he's got to go deeper, cross court, and try and, again, go down the line with the backhand. He's got one of the best down the line backhands in the game when he's hitting it correctly. And we saw quite a few of them in the semi-final when he was playing some good tennis. I think he needs to really commit to it for me. And if he does, he's got a good chance. I also think he needs to serve volley. At times, Zverev, I think he needs to commit to coming into volley. I know he didn't have a particularly good volleying day for me against Tsitsipas and hasn't in the past, but I think he is relatively natural at volleying at the net, and I think that's something that he needs to utilize more. Tsitsipas is very natural when it comes to coming to the net. I think he needs to utilize that as well and try and serve volley, especially because Zverev at times, especially when he's standing so far back in a return position, will hit the return loopy, with a lot of coverage and not a lot on it, but he's trying to hit it with depth, right? That return, he's trying to make sure he makes it, and he makes it with depth so that he at least gets to neutral. That is what Zverev is looking for. He's not necessarily looking to go big with a return and go straight away into kind of gear 5, right? In the return point, he's saying, actually, no, I want to just get into the rally and then, okay, let's make sure I'm in neutral. I don't want to be on the back foot, but I don't feel like I need to take the risk and go onto the front foot and potentially miss the return. That is, for me, that's what his mentality is. But Tsitsipas, he read that for parts of that semi-final, and probably that's why he's had success in the past. And he came forward at times and served and volleyed. and it worked. It did work, and I think he needs to utilize that as well. So that's something for me that's really crucial because, especially with that return from Zverev. Now, at times, Zverev did then read it and started to go flatter and committed to the return. I think Tsitsipas, of course, has to hit a good first serve as well. If it's in the hitting zone of Zverev, then he's just a sitting duck. So I think he needs to, of course, pick and choose when he serves and volleys. I'm not saying rush to the net every single point, a la Maxime Cressy, but I think he can utilize that game as well. So I think he's just got to be smart in his play. The slower court, I think, does then start to favor Tsitsipas more the more that I talk about it. Madrid, a quicker surface, I think, was Zverev serving well. But for me, it is going to be a massive, I think, emphasis on not just the serve return dynamic, but also how many forehands does Zverev give Tsitsipas? Is he going to give Tsitsipas a lot of forehands? Because if he does, he's going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. I'm just looking at Zverev kind of throughout the Italian Open so far and what his serve stats have looked like. 64% first serves, 67%. You can see the first serve points one is dropped, and that's because of the slower surface. 70% against Christian Garin, 76% against Alex de Minaur, and against base 79%. But I mean, that was the first round. So his first serve percentage is pretty high. It's going to be I reckon we're going to get a really tight third set. I'm going to go with Tsitsipas. That's my prediction. To be honest, actually, I just think he's going to get revenge. I think the slower clay court does suit his game more. So that's my pick. That's my pick. Tsitsipas in 3 sets. 3 tight sets, though, I tell you that. 3 tight sets for sure. Let me know your thoughts on that. And then Novak Djokovic versus Casper Ruud. Now, this is an interesting one. Of course, Casper Ruud has been in some pretty adverse form as of late, but this is a good run for him now, right? He's now finally made the semifinals here in Rome. When I say finally, but as in considering his recent performances, I mean, in Madrid, he lost in the first round or second round to Lajovic in his first match in 3 sets. Bavarian International, he lost to Van der Zandschulp. Barcelona, he lost in the quarterfinals. Monte Carlo, he lost in the round of 16. So he just hasn't had a particularly good run since making the final of Miami. The whole clay court swing has been pretty much a write-off for him until this tournament. So it's great to see him come back into form. He got revenge over Van der Zandschulp in his second round match, then beat Brooksby in straights and Shapovalov in straights. So look, he's coming up against the world number 1, and Djokovic is playing some pretty inspired tennis. The drop shot is working almost to a T like clockwork at the moment. And him and Felix Auger Aliassime, they traded drop shots and both had success with it. But Djokovic is a tool that wasn't really working at the start of the clay court swing, but he hasn't played a lot of tennis as well this year still. Now he's getting games under his belt, and you just feel like he has honed that to a T now, and it is working. It is working for the most part, and it's one of the best droppers on tour. I think Alcaraz for me is the best, but Djokovic's is not far behind. I think a lot of people sleep on it because of how dynamic his game is, and of course he's able to utilize so many different things. I think the worrying thing for Casper Ruud will be he'll watch that Felix game or the highlights, and I'm sure he will watch it, and he would have been watching it potentially, and think Djokovic is crunching the forehand. Djokovic was absolutely crunching the forehand in that match, and I think that is a cause for concern for anyone because, yes, that's an improved weapon. Yes, he's able to dictate points with it now, but just the level of, I think, just the level of power he was exerting on that forehand was, for me, frightening at times. I mean, the 1+ play as well was great, and it was almost like I was watching Stefanos Tsitsipas. He was hitting a serve, and then it was a block return from Felix right into the backhand corner, loopy. And Djokovic would say, I'm not going to hit a backhand. I'm hitting a forehand. And he went into in with the forehand, crunched it into in, and Felix is just really good defensively, so he was able to get it back. But straight away, Djokovic is on the front foot. Straight away. And against Casper Ruud, I don't know if he's going to be able to get that back. I don't even know if he's going to be able to survive as long as Felix did in those rallies. If Djokovic plays like how he did in the quarterfinals, the backhand is always good. We know that. There are a couple more mistakes on it than I was expecting from him. But I think that's just because Felix, again, was playing so well and was able to kind of not just hit to the backhand, but hit with a great amount of depth and power, really, really forced Djokovic to hit that backhand short with a short backswing and kind of really get low to it. And that can happen. But the forehand for me, like the angles he's finding cross court as well, it is pretty frightening at the moment. And it's a massive positive if you're a Nole fan, for sure. It really is. So, yeah, for me, I mean, I think he'll win in straight sets. I think Casper Ruud is a very good clay court player. I get that. But I just think, like, what can he bring to Djokovic that's going to harm him? Is his return of serve going to harm Djokovic? No, I think Djokovic comes out on top in that aspect. In the kind of serve to return dynamic where Casper Ruud's serving, Djokovic is. I don't think Djokovic is going to have a problem with Casper Ruud's serve. I mean, he was managing to kind of stick with Felix, right, with his serve, and he was serving incredibly well. I mean, it was like watching Pete Sampras, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. That's how well I thought he was serving. Casper Ruud can't serve to that degree. So Djokovic, for me, is going to win both those battles. That's at least half of the match kind of done and dusted, if that makes sense, and kind of the dynamic in favor of Djokovic, at least half. Then we look at the, I guess, rally dynamic. I can't see Ruud winning the majority of shorter points. I just can't see how Djokovic loses this. I can't. He might lose a set, and that can happen because sometimes his level can drop. But for me, if he plays the level he played yesterday, it's going to be a routine victory. I know it sounds like I'm completely writing off Casper Ruud, and I kind of am, aren't I? But I just can't see it. How does he win this? How does he win this? Does someone explain to me? I mean, he had good high first serve percentage against Shapovalov, 72%. I think for me, actually, and let's talk about it properly. His win percentage behind first serve has been really good as well throughout this tournament, over 70%. In fact, 80%, closer to 80%. Right, so that's because he's managing to do similar to what Tsitsipas has done and has been doing, which is making a lot of those balls into forehands. And his forehand on the 1+ shot, it can be hurtful. So Casper Ruud needs to make as many forehands as possible, and I think he needs to shorten the points on his service games. If he can even just hit his spots with his serve without necessarily exerting himself too much, he's hitting, I think, at around 70% first serves in. If he can hit, at least 80% of his 1+ shots as forehands, at least, he'll have a decent chance of being able to hold. And I reckon he needs to then hammer that 1+ shot. It can't be safe. He's got to go big into out or into in. Into in, of course, is a good play, especially on the ad side, because most likely Djokovic is going to go cross court with a backhand return. He's got to utilize it. He's got to probably be a little bit clever as well, and at times try and creep into the net, although it's probably not his natural game. But he needs to try and get on the front foot as soon as possible against Djokovic, get him on the back foot, and really just hope that he is able to break Djokovic down defensively, which is easier said than done because most of the time Djokovic will be playing a point defensively and then somehow manage to transition that into neutral and then attack kind of in an absolute blink of an eye. And that's because of the angles at times he's able to utilize when on the stretch, and he kind of just will hit the forehand shorter at an angle when he's out wide and he's being dragged and he's actually on the back foot, and then straight away he's back to neutral because the opponent is dragged out himself, and then he has to come forward, and then Djokovic is able to then not stay 3-4 meters behind the baseline, but he's able to come back into the court, take on the shorter ball. So it's a really clever play from Djokovic, and he is one of the best defenders we've ever seen. So it's not a surprise, right, that Ruud is going to have a hard time of it. But for me, Djokovic in straight sets, that's my prediction. I'm predicting a Djokovic-Tsitsipas final. I will obviously do a preview for that later on, so we don't know if that's exactly. It might. Who knows? It might be a Ruud Zverev final. What do I know? It can happen. It can happen for sure. Djokovic is playing some great tennis, I think, right now. But a week or so ago, it wasn't that good, his levels. So at some point, we will see a dip. It's just when. And is he going to dip for 2 sets? Unlikely for me, but you never know. And Casper Ruud could play some inspired tennis. So don't write him off. I think it'll be an exciting match, no doubt. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Please remember to hit that like button, please, if you haven't done so already, and do subscribe if you're new. If you're listening on a podcast platform, do remember to leave a rating or review. It really, really does help us out, so we do appreciate it. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you on the next